Well, I wish I'd have saved my Arteta bottle story for this game instead. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't see a world in which Arsenal didn't win this game. Just because I thought from the poor results in the league that have happened over the last little while, the poor performance against Newcastle, which in my opinion has sort of already lost the League Cup. I know there's still a second leg to go. A lot of things can still happen in that game. I just can't see Arsenal going to St James's and turning over a 2-goal deficit to come back and win the tie without Newcastle scoring as well. That's just my personal opinion. I think that tie's done. And I just thought after all those setbacks and after how criticised this Arsenal team have been by their own fan base as well, and this desperation it feels like it's coming to now to win a trophy, to give you something to cling on to with Arteta. I just thought this was going to be a deciding game for them. I thought United were going to do what they ended up doing, which is that they were going to come and they were going to make it difficult for Arsenal. They were going to reduce space, be tight, be hard to beat, similar to they were against Liverpool. But Arsenal were just going to have too much quality. And even with 10 men, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Now, they had chances. They had chances, and we'll get onto some of the criminal offenders in the squad in a minute. But I mean, I'm still astonished that Arsenal haven't come away from this tie. 120 minutes, over half of that being with 10 men for United at home, with the referee giving them some fairly generous decisions, and they couldn't get through the game. This is an issue for Arteta. A drop of form now for the rest of the season that almost leaves him in a top four race as opposed to a title challenge. I don't think he's going to get sacked, whatever happens at the end of the year, but a poor end to this season then leaves the pressure for next season huge. Arsenal need to back him as well. It can't just come from Arteta, and Arteta needs to do things differently and do things better. Arsenal need to back him huge. He needs at least one, probably two attacking players. I think there's another midfielder needed. There needs to be additions. But without going too mad, we'll go into the actual game and we'll discuss it from an Arsenal attacking perspective, first of all. So Arsenal would look to build in a sort of asymmetric 2-4-4, and that would be with Jorginho as the pivot. Odegaard slightly deeper, occupying the half space on the right hand side, with Moreno occupying the half space on the left hand side. Typically, though, you'd have Moreno a lot more advanced. You'd have him almost in the forward line, and Odegaard could flirt into a deeper position, almost forming a double pivot with Jorginho, and they could sit in between the two fullbacks. And initially, in the first half, United did go and try and disrupt that Arsenal build-up stage and win the ball back high up. The only issue that came from this, I say the only issue, it was a massive issue, and that completely disrupted the entire United press, was Arsenal's flexibility, the rotations between players in that build-up stage, the way they overload those areas as well with numerical advantages and the fluid movements, it just really caught United out. And I'll be honest with you, it became a bit hard to analyse from a Manchester United perspective, just because it felt like whatever plan they had, it just got completely disrupted. Initially, you'd get Højlund starting on Jorginho, and then as the ball went to Saliba or Gabriel, typically it went to Saliba first off, you'd get Højlund going to press. Garnacho could come in to Gabriel. Fernandes maybe moving on to Timber. Mainu coming on to Jorginho. And Ugarte just sort of hovering in behind, mopping up wherever opened up, really, from an Arsenal perspective and trying to cover. The issue is with Odegaard's positioning. Now, Odegaard dropping into this area of the pitch made it a little bit harder for Bruno Fernandes. So if Saliba received it on the outside, Bruno had this issue where he couldn't fully commit over to Timber to stop that pass going in because it would leave Odegaard free, but he couldn't stay too close to Odegaard. Otherwise, that pass would be easier for Timber to receive and take on the half turn. And with Odegaard and Timber, those are two very creative threats that United couldn't really risk leaving exposed. Occasionally, as the half wore on, you'd see Dalot moving up from his left wing back position with Martinez covering around, leaving a back four. But it still caused issues on that front, and even if United forced him going down that way, you'd maybe get Højlund dropping into Odegaard, which left Saliba free. Saliba could then play a ball to Jorginho, who could maybe look to drop in deeper, leaving Mainu in a position with, does he come up to engage with Jorginho in these deeper areas, or stay back and try and cover the space and not leave too much in the middle, which then created an issue. You could then either get Saliba moving into the midfield, allowing Odegaard to take up more of a free role and completely disrupt that United shape, or if Saliba doesn't move into the centre, Lewis Skelly can invert from left back to, again, overload this side of the pitch, because Arsenal would more often than not find themselves on the right-hand side of their build-up. How United react to this was completely down to the individuals involved. It was a bit chaotic at points, and whatever United's plan was, it completely disrupted them. So you get maybe Ugart coming into this area here. Mainly would have to try and shadow the pass into Lewis Skelly while perhaps pressing Jorginho. Garnacho as well, having to manage between Gabriel and Jorginho as well as an option. Højlund between Saliba and Jorginho. So those little movements for Arsenal and the players that found themselves free would cause a United player to have to make a decision in coming out to him and forcing an opening somewhere. And Odegaard was the best at this in terms of his positioning, the way he'd just sort of roll off of certain markers to find space in and around that area. He could even drop into the Jorginho position to get the ball and use his creative passing from deep. And where they'd been so successful, United, in these pressing stages, at least they were against Liverpool, was the wide centre-backs inclusion, and that's a massive part of a back five system, is how your wide centre-backs interact and press high up the pitch and get involved and equal the numbers that you don't have in midfield. The issue is because Arsenal's players aren't defined within their strict positions in the framework of a tactic like Liverpool's were. It relied on decision making, split second decision making from the likes of De Ligt and Martinez of when to press. Now, Martinez is a lot more front footed, he's a lot more aggressive. I think now we're starting to see a level of comfort in him. I think his decision making of when to engage, he's got that aggression to go up and win balls in these areas. So whether it was Timber, whether it was Odegaard, whether it was whoever in this position, if they found themselves free in this right half space, he would look to engage, he would look to move up the pitch and try and equal the numbers if maybe Bruno caught himself a little bit out wide. Where they did struggle, United, was De Ligt. Now, De Ligt, he's a little bit more lacking in mobility, I think it's fair to say. He doesn't make those quick, sudden movements to go and find a player that's free and try and equal numbers. So let's just say if United did get caught and Jorginho could find that pass into Lewis Skelly, as he could turn into this area, and it wouldn't just be Jorginho, to be fair, Odegaard's passing to move out of the shape as United try and block him into the player free in the left half space or far out on the left-hand side was key. Is fantastic on the reverse pass to just break the press. De Ligt would then read this and try and get close, but he'd get caught in between the defensive line and the player in the build-up that's received the ball in space too easily, and then that leaves him in a position where does he go up to engage fully and try and win the ball back, or drop off and cover the space? And he sort of got caught in between the middle of neither. So that meant that the pass could open up into the wide player. Lewis Skelly could play it down to Martinelli, and Arsenal could get up the pitch that way. Moreno could maybe drag Mazraoui inside or look for an easier pass that he could play through to Martinelli to get him further up the pitch and closer to the box a lot quicker. But that was a threat. United, I think, did try and block him into the centre with the midfield two backing onto the front three, potentially pressing, trying to block passing lanes in. But just that versatility from Arsenal made it hard. And even if Lewis Skelly moved inside, you could still get overloads with David Raya coming up into the defensive line where he'd come up relatively unchallenged. And it was hard. Again, it just leaves United with a lot of split-second decisions of how they try and box Arsenal in. You'd see it almost with the players in between the two. So Højlund could come around from Saliba to try and maybe get close to Raya. Fernandez in between Timber and Saliba. Ugart and Mainu backing onto the two pivots, whoever they may be. And Garnacho doing the same on the far side. But that means there's always a free man, essentially. There's always at least two free men, and United found it really hard. And especially when you had the likes of Kai Havertz, who again, just kept showing in far too deep. Moreno did. Whenever Kai Havertz did drop in, Martinez was very aggressive and being front-footed and getting close to him. The odd time Moreno showed for the ball, De Ligt did, to be fair, get close to him and prevented him from really turning. And so Arsenal found success playing out. They got around that United shape a bit too easily at points. I don't know why United was so keen on pressing and being aggressive. I think dropping off would have been a little bit more of a better option for him. And at the start of the second half, before the red card, you did see him drop in. You did see him drop into this 5-4-1 shape, not as keen to engage with Arsenal in these areas, almost forcing them to have to come up and play through the thirds and try and break down United's shape initially. They weren't being pulled into too many traps by Arsenal. They were patient, restricted space, and it's what they should have been doing all along. That first half, I think they wasted too much energy and gave away too much space. Just United fell for their traps one too many times. But when Arsenal did push United back, how did it look? Now, this is where the defensive shape was a lot better for United. I think Amram has really sorted out the defensive structure when they're deep and soaking up pressure. He's dropped them into a 5-4-1, whereas before he was trying with this 5-2-3, and he exposed the centre midfielders and they got ripped apart far too many times. He settled on the 5-4-1, which is great. It's so hard to play through the centre. It's so hard to connect with the wide players as well, because United can defend the centre areas brilliantly and defend the width excellently. And Arsenal would go with their 3-1-6. It would be with Timber typically tucking in as Lewis Skelly moved forward and inverted into the left half space. It could differ and it could interchange. You could sometimes see Lewis Skelly as the left centre back and Timber pushed forward. Odegaard in the right half space, but also had a dual role, which we'll talk about. Moreno was the central attacking player, again, anonymous. Jesus out wide right, Martinelli left, and Havertz would sort of fill in into the forward line and sort of pick the spaces vertically that Arsenal would leave open. Typically, you get Odegaard trying to come outside of the shape, so you'd have Havertz pushed onto Lisandro Martinez. Now, United's shape to deal with this was a lot better, and again, they started off the second half dropping deep, not pressing as high, and it would mean Højlund would go on to Saliba once he felt appropriate to do so. You'd get Garnacho and Fernandez managing out wide and covering the wide centre backs. Mainu could push onto Jorginho in the pivot, and you'd have Ugarte just covering the middle area of the pitch. And I meant to say this in the build-up stage for Arsenal, but Ugarte, as much as he had issues with the overload that he was having to deal with having to manage the free man that appeared in behind, his energy levels and his physicality and his ability to cover space and win tackles is top draw. He's grown into this United team, Ugarte. I'm really liking him. And as well, having that deeper base in which to have that physical compactness and protection makes it a lot easier for the likes of that back three to engage with players. So let's just see here, they're sort of one-on-one in that back five. They'll quickly come and reduce that space between themselves and the midfield four. So let's just drop this in a little bit. If that pass to a central player becomes on, let's say Havertz drops in, Martinez will come up, Maguire will press on, Ligt, and they'll just quickly reduce that space and make it so hard for Arsenal to try and find gaps in the centre areas. The only real joy they had, Arsenal, in creating chances from these positions would be with Martin Odegaard. Now, he could come into the deeper area to get on the ball and create from these areas, use his technical quality to find passes in between the lines, or find it outside of the Manchester United shape, receiving it here. Let's say if Fernandez had gone up to press Timber, this maybe left a clear pass that Jorginho could play it through to Odegaard. It left Arsenal to go one-on-one with their attacking five now against the United defensive five. Havertz pinning in Martinez, so Martinez would be forced to engage, and then Odegaard could slip this ball through just in between Martinez and Dalot that Jesus could run onto and put a cross in. And he could also produce a few open play crosses in these areas to find balls into the back post for the likes of Hazard, for the likes of Sterling when he came on, Declan Rice, to try and get goal scoring opportunities, and they did. But the level of finishing let Arsenal down. A few good chances were created, a good couple Bayern saves, and terrible finishing, and United soak it up. And United even managed to maintain this level of defensive solidity with one less player on the pitch. So if I just remove him, Diogo Dalot got himself sent off after moving to right back. Him and Mazraoui swap positions second half. Whether that contributed to Dalot dealing with a more dynamic attacking threat in Martinelli, he just couldn't really deal with them one-on-one, made a few stupid decisions. I don't know, but Mazraoui moved to left wing back. Garnacho occupied a more right wing back position, right back until Amad Diallo came on. Bruno Fernandes then had to drop in to the midfield three. Højlund was the sort of sole presser in these defensive areas. They'd still look to press the outside centre back, but they'd have to be really responsible in dropping in. Højlund would have to really acknowledge the space in behind as well. So let's just say if Gabriel tried to play around the outside and find angles his way, Fernandez would still come into press. Højlund just had to be really wary of that gap in between himself and Ugarte, or himself and Mainu, whoever ended up in that position. So they lost ground in the midfield because they only had three. So those positions Odegaard was picking up on that right half space, he was finding a lot more of now and able to pull off a few more crosses. Again, a lack of finishing quality for Arsenal cost them the game. Havertz was really, really poor. I mean, he couldn't have had a worse game, to be honest with you. Also, while I was critical of Ligt, having him and Maguire in these situations, they are fantastic box defenders. Fantastic box defenders in deep, low, compact blocks. When you have to soak up pressure, which of course United were going to do with 10 men, they were excellent. Put their bodies on the line for everything, clearing shots off the line, diving in. You couldn't have asked for much more from them. They defended with heart and desire and leadership and bravery. All those intangibles you can't quite measure. They had it, and they were responsible for United getting to extra time and then winning the game on the shootout. And full credit to them. I can't speak highly enough about their performances. They deserve a lot of credit for this. But how did United approach the game from an attacking point of view? I'll bring Dalot back in for this. And needless to say, when United did win the ball back, direct. Arsenal on the counter, quick attacking play, getting the ball up to Højlund, where he could either look for the ball in behind from the back, trying to run the channels and get chances away, which he didn't do enough of, and hold the ball up and look to bring others into play, look to find the ball to either Fernandez, Mainu, maybe even Garnacho, but Garnacho would look to play runs in behind where maybe the second ball for Bruno could be picked up and he could play that ball into Garnacho off of Gabriel. The problem is I thought Højlund's hold-up play was really, really poor. Couldn't get the ball under control, tried things a bit too fancy at points with the back heels and a bit too exuberant in the way he was trying to link up play, do the simple things right. A few times United did waste chances. They got a bit of luck in the second half when Garnacho was able to drive the ball forward with Lewis Skelly falling on his backside and giving space for Garnacho to run into. He picked a really good pass to Bruno Fernandes, who got a fantastic shot away and scored with a really good effort. And to be fair, once they did break, and they could get Garnacho and Højlund breaking free and running up, Højlund would then look to attack the box as Garnacho received it out wide, dragging the defence back, and Bruno Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo were really good at timing their runs to the edge of the box to look for cutbacks as Arsenal were desperate to get back into the box to defend it where they could get their shots away. And there you go. But if they couldn't break through that area, they would look to go back to Bayindir. So if I just sort the shape out and make it look a bit more sensible. So once the ball got played back to Bayindir, generally his point of play would be to get the ball long, go direct and try and hit that forward area again and use United's direct threat to their advantage. The biggest problem with this, Bayindir's kicking may be the worst in the Premier League. Bloke could not reach the halfway line without it bouncing about 6 times, sent it out for a throw in about a further 18 times. It's clear maybe why he's not the first choice for United. Obviously important to a top club now to have a keeper that can play out from the back and distribute the ball well and be that extra man for his team. He's shown he cannot be that guy. He cannot be, and he wasted a few opportunities going long with just poor distribution. United would build up in their back three. It would sometimes be a back four, to be fair, if Mazraoui dropped and De Ligt and Maguire then played wide of Bayindir to offer those short options. Lisandro Martinez moved into a left-back position. It made it easier to try and find the balls into the pivots and Mainu and Agar, which they didn't do enough of. Dalot could push a little bit more forward, and Bruno Fernandes had a little bit more freedom to come into the half space and focus only on coming into the half space. And Arsenal would look to go high press. And United would generally try to play the ball into the left side of the pitch, as having Lisandro Martinez on the ball is the greater creative threat in this area. So that would mean Martinelli would come onto De Ligt, Havertz onto Maguire, Jesus would move onto Martinez, get Odegaard and Moreno backing up the press into Ugarte and Mainu. Jorginho would typically sit a little bit deeper, coming across to Fernandes as Timber came onto Dalot. But having Martinez with the ball on the outside got the best out of his technical quality to play a ball into Højlund's feet, where he could hold the ball up, play it to Garnacho, and commit to the attack I was speaking about before. Or play the ball to Fernandes, as then the Arsenal shape would cover across. Lewis Skelly would move into Garnacho, and the free man would be Mazraoui on this side. So if Garnacho started making direct movements in here, if I just move this shape across for Arsenal, then that would force the Arsenal shape over. And this left Fernandes with 2 options. One, he could play the ball up to Mazraoui on the far side. The biggest issue with this, if Mazraoui received the ball a little bit too deep, he doesn't have that quality to drive with the ball forward. He's not a dribbler. You're not a fast-paced back-to-front player. Very limited athletically and engine-wise. He's fantastic technically, but he's not a wing-back in that sense. Another would be with Garnacho and Højlund then starting to pull off of Lewis Skelly and Gabriel in this area. So Lewis Skelly would get dragged in a little bit further on to try and deal with Garnacho receiving the ball. Højlund could then pull off into the space between Gabriel and Lewis Skelly, which then causes Lewis Skelly to have to make a decision coming in close to Højlund, which leaves the option to Garnacho over on the far side. So if they pulled off at the back post and they could be found, that was a clean breakthrough on goal for United. And it didn't happen as often. Arsenal recovered well. Raya was really good sweeping off of his line. But United did carry that direct threat. Obviously, once the red card happened, it wasn't really as much of an attacking game for United as it was just holding on to that point, getting it to extra time, getting it to penalties, surviving, and winning the lottery of the shootout, in where David Raya dived roughly 3 hours before a run-up was even had to a penalty to be kicked. And United go through to the 4th round. And Arsenal, I've said it before, I'll say it again, missed opportunity. It can't keep happening. They've lost the ability to bin off competitions. They have to deliver something. They have to be a team that challenges on all fronts. But we'll see. Still a long season yet, but he's got a lot to make up for at this point, Arteta. I'd love to know what you guys think, though. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below, tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.